Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We've been talking about real estate, and I've really been enjoying talking about it. And I've got a couple people still asking me some questions here and there, so we're gonna kind of keep talking about it a little bit more. But more people have been asking me about tips about buying your first rental property, and so I asked around for some of the people I know that have been in a rental property, and I asked them what their tips were for people who are just getting into it, right? And I'm gonna give you some of what they say, right? Because if you're thinking about purchasing an investment property, right? I mean, real estate's produced some of the wealthiest people, right? So there's plenty of reasons to think about it, right? Because it's a good investment, right? So a lot of people are gonna agree, however, that as with any investment, it's better to be well versed before diving in with hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So that's why I got all these together. The first one I want to talk about is being a landlord. I mean, are you even cut out to be a landlord, right? Do you know your way around a toolbox? I mean, how are you at repairing drywall, unclogging a toilet, right? I mean, sure, you could call somebody to do it for you, or you could hire a property manager, but that's going to eat into your profits, right? Well, property owners who have one or two homes often do their own repairs to save money. Of course, that's going to change as you add more properties to your portfolio, right? I know someone who, lives on the East Coast and owns properties on the West Coast, right? And he says, he's not really that handy, right? So I was like, well, how do you make it work? And he's like, well, I put together a good solid team of people, who can, good contractors or handyman and cleaners and all that stuff, right? And, some of this isn't advisable for brand new investors, right? But as you get the hang of real estate investing, you're right, you don't need to remain local, right? You can go invest in different places, right? You could live in the Mid East and have properties, on the coast, right? So the second thing I want to talk about, it's going to be finding the right location, right? Because the last thing you want to do is just be stuck with a rental property in an area that's declining, right? Rather than being stable or like picking up steam and appreciating, or something like that. A city or like a locale where you live or whatever, where the population is growing and a revitalization plan is underway, represents a good potential investment opportunity. When choosing a proper rental property, look for a location with low property taxes, a decent school district, and decent amount of like amenities. Think of stuff like parks, malls, some restaurants, movie theaters, stuff like that, right? In addition, a neighborhood with low crime rates, access to public transportation, and like a growing job market may mean a larger pool of potential renters. Well, let's move that into our next one, which is going to be you need to factor in unexpected costs, right? Things come up. It's not just maintenance and upkeep costs that'll eat into your rental income, right? Because there's always, right, always the potential for an emergency to, pop up out of nowhere, right? Roof damage from a storm, right? Or burst pipes that destroy a kitchen floor, right? Some people say, plan to set aside 15 to 25% of your rental income for these types of costs, right? So you have a fund to pay for timely repairs, right? I mean, you just kind of, don't set aside nothing, right? Make sure you're setting aside something because eventually, something will happen and it'd be easier to go into that pool of money that you have rather than not having it there at all, right? Think of it as like the emergency fund, uh, for your rental properties instead of like, the emergency fund like for your life, right? Same thing. So the next thing is some people probably aren't going to like this, but if you're just getting into it and you're new, of a lot of people have told me this, and they say a lot of new people don't like hearing this. Avoid a fixer upper, right? Because it's tempting to look for the house that you can get at a bargain and flip into a rental property. However, if this is your first property, it's probably going to be a bad idea, right? It's not going to work out how you think it is, right? Unless you have a contractor who does quality work on the cheap, or you're skilled at large-scale home improvements, you're going to pay too much to renovate, right? Instead, look for a home that is priced below the market and needs like minor repairs. Paint, maybe a couple fixtures here and there, right? Just at least little things. Right? Don't try to get the fixer upper. And this was a big one. Like, a lot of people told me that when people first get into real estate and you get into your rental properties, they want to find the really cheap property and put all the work into it and triple or quadruple, and they end up spending way too much money on it, right? So avoid a fixer upper, right? So the next thing, speaking of money, right, you need to calculate your operating expenses, right? So operating expenses on your new property will be between 35% and 80% of your gross operating income, right? So if you charge, for instance, $1,500 for rent, your expenses come in at, say, $600 per month. You're at 40% for operating expenses. For an even easier calculation, just use the 50% rule. So if the rent you charge is $1,000 per month, expect to pay at least $500 in total expenses, right? That'll just be an easy, quick calculation that you can do, right? So the next thing I want to make sure you guys know is when you're getting into this, you really need to know your legal obligations, right? I mean, you need to know them, because rental owners need to be familiar with the landlord-tenant laws in their state, right, or your city. Yeah, because it changes from state to state, city to city, right? There's different rules. What works in New York is not going to work in Florida. It's not going to work in California. It's not going to work in Texas. Not going to work in Tennessee. Not going to work in Ohio. Right? It's just not going to work the same in every place, right? It's important to understand, right, your tenants' rights and your obligations regarding like security deposits, lease requirements, the eviction rules, fair housing, right, and a bunch more in order to avoid a bunch of legal hassles. Yeah. So the last thing I want to talk about, which I hope everyone does, is you need to weigh the risks versus the rewards, right? Just like in any financial decision, you need to determine if the payoff is worth the potential risk involved. Does investing in real estate make sense for you, right? It might seem attractive, but does it make sense for you? Investing in something else might be better, right? It's not going to be for everyone. Yeah. All right, guys. I really hope some of these tips, pointed you in the right direction and maybe solidified you wanting to get into real estate, or maybe made you think twice and go, okay, well, maybe I'm not ready, right? If you haven't already, I'd really love for you guys to subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Until I see you guys in the next video, y'all be safe.